Hello lovely patrons, thank you once again for joining me for another month of rewilding yourself through story. This month you chose dragon stories and I am so looking forward to telling this first one. This one is called the Lyminster Knucker dragon and it's one of my favourite tales for many reasons. To give you a little bit of history about what a Knucker dragon is, if you haven't come across one before, it's something that's very specific to Sussex. The name Knucker dragon is thought to have come from the Anglo-Saxon Knicker, that's N-I-C-O-R. Knucker is actually spelled K-N-U-C-K-E-R, but obviously the words change over time and it has been hundreds of years. So the Knucker, meaning dragon, Knucker dragons in particular live in deep, dark pools of water, of which you cannot see the bottom and cannot find the bottom, even with a plumb line. Many have tried, and this particular one in Lyminster is very deep. There's even some talk that maybe some church bells have been put down there to see how long they ring for on the way down, but I'm not sure about that. This story is about a particularly fearsome Knucker dragon. Our story starts in the village of Lyminster. For many, many decades, it has been a quiet little village. Not much has bothered them. Until what can only be described as an earthquake has struck the village. The ground shook and there wasn't much damage at first, until what the ground seemed to shake free was this enormous lizard, fearsome beast that came out of the bottomless pool that was known as the Knucker hole. Just after this shaking of the ground, this dragon slithered out of the hole, through the reeds, and they felt the wind whip up around them. The dragon made its way, hissing with a stench that came from its mouth that can only have been from years, hundreds of years of sleep, and this dragon was hungry. It flew around the village eating everything it could, and it didn't just stop at livestock, as many dragons do. So it ate the sheep, it ate the cows, it ate the pigs, and then it ate the children. Well, the villagers of Lyminster were not happy about this. Their livelihood had gone, their children had gone. This was a disaster. So the wealthy lord who owned most of the land in that area, fearing that the Knucker would come for his daughter next, put out a proclamation across the land that whoever could defeat this fearsome Knucker dragon would not only have his daughter's hand in marriage, but would also have a very, very nice manor house and some acres of land. This was a pretty good offer as far as the villagers of Lyminster were concerned, and many of them tried. Unfortunately, it resulted in their death because this Knucker dragon was particularly mean. They would go up to the pond and they would make a lot of noise and they'd have sharp pointy sticks, as you would imagine, and perhaps a rake or a spade or a sword even. Some of them had a sword, but this was not going to defeat this particular dragon. And he'd come out of the water would bubble as he rose out, and his fearsome beast would roar, and one mouthful they were gone. It was as if nothing had ever happened. And then the dragon would move back down into the water until he was ready to go out and hunt for more small children. Well, when the villagers realised that they couldn't defeat it, they started to look further afield. Perhaps knights would like to come to the village and try their hand. And indeed, knights did. And they had their clanky armour and they had their horses and they had their long, long lances and more swords. But that didn't work either. Well, this went on for many days and many weeks. The Knucker dragon would at least once a week come out of his pond and he would rampage across the countryside, eating anything he could find, quite frankly, because now he'd started to eat some of the trees as well, because there wasn't much left for him. And there were people in neighbouring villages who were starting to worry that maybe the Knucker might start to move across to their village. And it was in Lyminster there was a visitor. Jim Polk, his name was. And he'd heard of this Knucker dragon, and he was in the local tavern drinking. And he was bragging about how there was absolutely no way he would let a Knucker onto his land to steal all of his sheep, and that if there was indeed a lord of the manor's daughter to be married, he was the man for the job. Well, of course, his friends and colleagues just laughed at him, but he said, "No, I have a plan." And so the next day, Jim Polk took a large wheelbarrow and he went into the forest near Lyminster. And he started to pick mushrooms. Not just any old mushrooms. He picked amanitas, panther caps, web caps, destroying angels, and Satan's bowlets. These were some of the most deadly, poisonous, lethal mushrooms in our lands. He took them home and he made them with a pig trough. He made them into an enormous pie. And with the pie still steaming, he loaded it on to the back of his horse and cart, and he rode up to the Knucker hole. And as he approached the Knucker hole, he did not ride the cart all the way. In fact, he got off and he geed up his horse to get closer to the pond. And as it did, the Knucker dragon heard the snorting and the whinnying of the horse that did not want to go that close to such a dragon. And he rose out of the water. It bubbled and he hissed, and the grass around the pond swirled in the steamy mist and fog that came from the dragon's nostrils. Up he came out of the water, and he saw a very tasty looking horse with an enormous pie behind it, and he ate it in one gulp. Well, with such a deadly mixture within the pie, the dragon was dead very quickly. And Jim Polk came out from the tree behind which he was hiding, and he went over to the dragon, and using a sword that had been left on the ground by the last knight, he took the head off the dragon, lifted it high, and walked into the village of Lyminster carrying its head. The villagers cheered. This was indeed their hero, and the lord of the manor had to admit that this was a brave fellow, and he could indeed have his daughter's hand in marriage, the manor house and the acre of land. Well, that night in the pub, Jim Polk was celebrating. The tavern was full of singing and dancing and cheering and noise. It was a sight to behold. The villagers had lifted Jim Polk up onto their shoulders, and they had been singing around the pub, "For he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, and so say all of us." Jim Polk said, "Put me down, I haven't even had a chance to have a drink yet." "Of course, my man," they said, and somebody got a drink from the bar. Jim Polk picked up his pint, sipped a long gulp from the glass, and as he put it down on the bar, he wiped the beer away from his mouth with his hand and dropped down dead. That was the end of Jim Polk. He had unfortunately met the same fate as that Knucker dragon of the Knucker hole, because you see, dear listener, Jim Polk had not washed his hands. For he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, and so say all of us. I hope you enjoyed that story. That is a legend from Sussex, just over the border from where I live. It's a very, very popular story in my area. You can go to Lyminster and you'll find in the church there is a stained glass window with a picture of the Knucker dragon being defeated. Do go and check it out if you get the chance. I'll see you again soon for more Tales of Dragons. Toodle pip!